Hi and welcome to CSM Tech. I'm Peter Briggs. This week we're going to be talking about inclusivity, diversity, ethics and morality within leadership itself. Hi, welcome back. This week we're going to be talking about how leadership is governed and supported by inclusivity, diversity, ethics and morality. Now, I understand these are quite emotive subjects, and some people probably won't agree with some of the things that I'm going to say today. But what I'm going to try and talk about will be centered around my understanding of inclusivity, diversity, ethics, and morality. Having been in the army for 22 years, I've seen morality and ethics being played out at a really difficult stage, challenging everybody's thoughts and processes, and the grey areas that survive within ethics and morality. Inclusivity and diversity, I'm going to be talking about them as well. We'll talk at length about how team composition is influenced by your inclusivity and diversity. And one thing I will say about that is that this is not about race, to me anyway. It's not about gender or sexuality or any of the characteristics protected by the Equality Act 2010. Although we will touch upon that, it is also about every other part of inclusivity and diversity, about what makes you and your team inclusive and diverse. It's not just about your race or your gender or your ethnicity. Often it's just about different perspectives and how you look at different perspectives to get the most out of your team. Okay, so if you have the opportunity, please like, subscribe and turn on the alerts for my channel. All that would be greatly appreciated. If you have any comments, put them down below. I'm sure that this might generate a lot of conversation, so please feel free to discuss these, and I will try and interact with you as much as physically possible. And without further ado, let's get on with the session. So my aims during this video will be to discuss inclusivity, diversity. We'll also talk about some of the morals and ethics and moral and ethic leadership. This video is not about race, although it will touch upon some aspects of race. It's not about gender, although again it will talk about like issues that surround gender. And what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to bring forth the idea that we can have diversity and inclusivity, and it doesn't have to harm your team. It doesn't have to harm your outcomes. It doesn't have to harm your product. What it can do is it can just bring different aspects to light, to your attention, that you can use then to be a better leader or to even be a better company. We're going to talk about how we can use diversity and inclusion to make your company better and use it as a business strategy. And we're going to be talking about how unconscious bias can force you into making bad decisions. We'll discuss unconscious bias a little bit. I have discussed it in one of my previous videos. I think it was my first video that I did. And so one of the things that we will probably discuss in this video will be the outcomes of unconscious bias. And then we'll talk about morals, ethics, and integrity. And those are pretty much hand to hand for me in the way that especially the British Army works, and how I feel that companies can be better, both ethically, morality-wise, but also have with them create loyalty. What is inclusivity? Without trying to be political or try to win brownie points with either the left or the right wing sects, I think the most important thing for as a business leader and as a team leader, as a leader himself, is that you can get inclusivity and it can up the game of your team. by having a team feel completely and utterly accepted, that their points of view will always be listened to, that their voices can be heard, that you're comfortable in your surroundings, and that no one fears the changes or the direction that the team is taking, then you have inclusivity. Now, that might mean that you need to bend to the will of your team. And a good leader is somebody that can bend to the will of the team when necessary. And the team needs to be able to bend to the will of the leader also when necessary. And when we talked about our different types of leadership in a previous video, when we talked about autocratic and democratic leaders, and we talked with the association with time, this is when you start getting that influx and movement from your team as well as your leader. So less time you have, the more autocratic leader you have, and the more flexibility the team needs to have. But if you've got a more democratic leader and you've got more time, then the team can be taking more of the time, and therefore the leader can bend towards the will of the team a little bit more. You're going to listen to your team and let them talk to you. And we will discuss in communication active listening. This is going to be absolutely key when we're talking about how a team can feel inclusive and that every single person's point of view is listened to, understood. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to enact on it. What you're just doing is you're just listening to what they're telling you and taking their point of view and understanding it. You don't just dismiss it, you just don't park it, you don't be dismissive with them as an individual. You listen to it. If it's got value, use it. If it doesn't, tell them so, thank them, and then move on. So diversity, very touchy subject, something that's going to enrage some people and to challenge other people, and to other people it's their bread and butter. It's very emotive subject and something that's always going to cause issues as a team leader and as a team. For me, I don't want us to feel like we're force feeding diversity, because that's not how a team works. You don't damage a team that's working well just for the sake of diversity. But what you can do is you can supplement a team with diversity to give you a different aspect. And we will talk about that in a second, about how you can add diversity to your team to think outside the box and get answers that you might not have come up with yourself. True diversity is not just about the 10 protected characteristics. True diversity is the diverse nature of the entire team. I've spoke about it previously. If you've got people on your team that talk the same, have the same education that you have, come from the same place, have had the same upbringing, of the same ethnicity, of the same gender, then you're always going to get the same answers. And I don't think that's a challenging position to be in if you're a leader. I don't see that that's something that a leader should aspire to be. You don't need to accept answers from people who are just going to agree with you. So from a law perspective, there are 10 protected characteristics, which we'll go through on the next slide. And they are protected by law, and your business, your company, should always have equality policy that protects those individuals. And they're really important when it comes to recruitment, really important when it comes to discipline. And so those should always be upheld as much as physically possible. We got two definitions on this slide as well, and we'll talk about unfair and how unfair is defined, and that is if any of the characteristics influence a decision affecting them. So whether that is them not getting a job because they're disabled, or they're not getting a job because they're female, or they are being sacked because they're of a different race or gender, or they have changed their gender. And then you've got harassment as well, and that is any unwanted or unwelcome words or actions that normally cause distress. If you intentionally offend somebody in the workplace, and you do it out of malice, then that is an offence. You are committing an offence. And therefore, what we shouldn't be doing is making people feel bad just because they're a different gender or a different colour, or that they have a different thought processes than we do. So here are the protected characteristics in law under the Equality Act 2010. And I do get the irony. I'm a white guy. I'm heterosexual. I'm I'm able-bodied, and I totally do get it. I mean, I'm here talking about um, protected characteristics and diversity and inclusion, and I'm probably the epitome of somebody that generally isn't inclusive and doesn't have very much inclusivity. But what I want to do is I just want to challenge some of the thought processes that some people have. I've seen it. I've worked with it. I mean, I felt it myself, and it goes both ways. And there is opportunities that I've had that that weren't available to me because of my race, my gender, and my sexuality. And that I was able-bodied as well, and I can totally see that. I mean, I am understanding enough to be able to see um, that there has to be a positive discrimination against some individuals to help them along. And inclusivity does help that. And diversity does help that. And if that means that I miss out on a couple of opportunities, yeah, I'm going to be a little bit gutted. But if it gives other people the opportunity that they might not have got because of that, then I'm all for it. Feeling safe in the workplace is a really important aspect of team building and developing a team. As a leader, you should make the workplace as welcoming and as homely as physically possible. I'm not asking you to get out comfy chairs and make everyone a cup of tea and biscuits. What I'm actually saying is that they all should feel at home and welcome in the workplace in order to get the best out of them. If you have a team that don't feel like they can be themselves, then you're not going to get the answers or the products that you require out of them, and you're not going to get the best out of them either. What we have to do is make sure that each of your team members feel welcome in the workplace. Um, if they make a complaint, it's listened to. The people listen to and enact on people's complaints. They're then just not dismissed. And the ideas that they have or the problems that they have are just swept under the rug. They are not a statistic either. They don't want to be treated like a statistic. And they don't want to be referred to as the disabled person or the girl on the maternity. They have names, they have real life issues that are important to them. And as a good team leader, you should be listening to people's problems and you should be taking them on board and helping them solve those problems so you can get the best out of them when the problems are arising. We used to do this before operational tours a lot. We felt that the best soldiers were the ones that didn't have the problems at home and didn't have worries that would constantly plague them during the operational tour. We wanted them to concentrate directly on the job in hand and not be sidelined by problems that might have been occurring at home. So the first and foremost thing that we would always do, we'd appoint a families liaison or a welfare officer that would be attached to the families to make sure that the family could function as a unit with the soldier, whoever was in the army, whether that was the mother or the father or away, and they had a support mechanism that made the family feel more confident about supporting the partner on operations, and it also meant the soldier was confident that their family was being looked after back at home. We had the military police there, so then if there were any problems with criminal damage or thefts, that they were looked after and they were dealt with correctly, and the patch was well policed, and that would also lighten the load for the soldiers on operational tours. What you'd also have is a period of time just before the operational tour where welfare would be almost key to make sure that every single soldier had all their problems and issues dealt with before they went away. Anything that might crop up. And that included recording of wills and recording of death letters. And making sure that we had all those in place if the worst came to the worst, and that the soldier and the family could be well looked after even if the worst came to the worst. So we've already spoke about some of um, the benefits of diversity and inclusion. And we're talking about that you get different answers for different solutions, different ways of working. You might challenge yourself. How many times have you looked at a company and they've started doing things that you might not appreciate, but they will help people of different diverse groups. So, for example, um, iOS 14 that got released the other day, that has more accessibility options for people who are partially sighted or are deaf. Um, and so they've changed their way of thinking in order to in order to cater for people of different diverse groups. They wouldn't have come up with that if they didn't have the right people in the right job in the first place. And they probably didn't have them for the iOS updates on previous years. But Apple seem to have changed it round and they're looking in a different direction and they're moving forward in the right directions to encompass different ways of working for those individuals that need them. You look at your iPhone, especially on the new iOS update, and there's loads of functionality that you probably don't even use. But just because you don't use them doesn't mean that anybody else doesn't use them. They're always useful for somebody else. And we shouldn't dismiss the ideas that other people need functionality where we don't need functionality. And when we don't think about that functionality, that's when you miss things. And that's when your company is missing the chance to open its doors to people of different diverse groups. Unconscious bias is something that we all have in us. It's back from when we were all cave men and women, we would look after our tribe or our family by protecting ourselves against people that didn't look like us and didn't sound like us. Now, that doesn't help us in a modern world where we're more accepting of people who are different from us, and we're more accepting that other people have better ideas than we have just because they've had a different upbringing or a different past. It doesn't help that that thought process is the first thing that jumps to mind as soon as we start talking about inclusivity and diversity. Because we have this unconscious bias, and any good leader should be able to fight against that unconscious bias. They should ask themselves serious questions, as you would do in your self-reflection and your mindfulness on whether you did something right or wrong on a previous encounter. Then we should also be reflective on our ability to combat unconscious bias. With unconscious bias, it attacks the reasoning behind it attacks what we feel is right, and we fall back into this malaise of being with people that either are our race or our gender or maybe even the accent. You can hear my Burnley accent from miles away, and I always hear a Burnley accent. I can hear a Burnley accent and I know it's from Burnley immediately. So that unconscious bias draws us towards people that are of our kin or of our race or of our gender. We as a leader should be able to fight against this. We should understand it, we have it, and therefore we should combat it. We do not judge other people for what they look like, how they dress, or how they act. What we judge them on is their outcomes and their products. Do they do the job? Are they good at it? Do they achieve the aims that you've set out from? Is it to the correct quality? Those are the things that you should be judging people on. And that is it. What you have to do as a leader is you should uncover unconscious bias within the team. You should get rid of it wherever you can. You seek it out, you challenge your team, and you challenge their unconscious bias. Once you've got a good idea of how your team acts, then you can educate them and bring them out. Sometimes it just has to be rooted out and got rid of at its first point. So ethical leadership, very important at this moment of time. I think we've become more ethical and more ethical leadership centric due to the financial crash of 2008. And I think it's an important facet of our job. How we can be transparent, in our decision making, how we can be more consultative of our decisions and how we're making our decisions, and that we're not making them in isolation. I know the civilian police and the army have moved towards an ethical leadership thought process in protecting the way that it does its job by having people talk to each other on a number of occasions in order to get an all-encompassing answer rather than just one individual's thought process or one individual's direction. It gives us a sense of community. We're working as a team, we're working to a single goal together, and we're going to reward change and innovation in that we're going to help other people feel like they can make change and make innovation, and it's going to change the culture of our organisation for the positive. Moral leadership leans nicely from ethical leadership in that there are some basic questions that you should be asking yourself about your morality. And that can be down to could you be proud of your behaviour? I always ask the question, would my mum be proud of my behaviour? And if I think my mum would be ashamed of my behaviour, then that's not the way I should be behaving. How would your friends and family feel if they know you have done something? Would they back you? Would they consider your understanding and back you 100%? Or would they just feel like that's, it's quite a selfish point of view and that you've not chosen the right path there? Has your behaviour been honest and fair and respectful of other individuals? Have you done what you can do to get the best out of every single individual? And have you helped them become better along the way? And are you acting within your organisation's culture? Now, every organisation has a culture. We are moving quickly towards an ethical culture across the board, and we will talk about cultures when we're working with managing people and leading people. Cultures are a massive part of business, and how you can build a culture and how you can change your culture within your organisation. But are you acting within the strategic operational culture of your organisation? You, as a leader, will need to show your team how to act. They will listen to what you have to say, but they will listen more to what you do. And the old adage is, you do as I say and not as I do. That's gone out the window, and now you do as I do and as I say. You've got to have cultural morals as well. And so every culture has its own moral compass, and every type of individual have their own cultural moral. So to hark back to my British Army days when we talked about moral courage, this is about making the right decision on a really bad day when no one else is watching. Can you say that you made the right decision? Moral courage, especially on operations, is absolutely vital to every British serviceman. The old saying is that you should do as you ought and not as you want to. That's a moral that the British Army tries to instill into all its soldiers, and that every officer should instill into their own team. Even if it means that you have to sacrifice something that you want in order to achieve it. That's what real moral courage is. Being honest with yourself and thinking about the team rather than yourself. Having integrity builds loyalty. Doing the right thing, choosing the right path, being truthful and honest and authentic develops loyalty within your team. Your team will learn to trust you because the decisions that you'll make are the right ones, not only for them, but for the team as a whole. The best thing that you'll ever get from your team is the trust that you are making the right decisions. If you are a moral leader, if you are an ethical leader, then you should be able to instill loyalty within your team. Having all those facets, including having the diversity of a team that feels like it's inclusive, and having a team that knows exactly the path that it's going to take because it trusts its leader, that's how you get the best results. So that's today's session. Well done on finishing the video. I hope that you have things to talk to me about. I hope that I've either brought something to your understanding, or maybe even touched upon something that you don't agree with. Please put your comments below. I'll try and answer as much as I physically can. Don't be silly about it though. I don't want arguments, and I'm not interested in arguments. If it's constructive, I'll listen to it and I'll reply back. Thank you very much. Please like and subscribe the video as much as physically possible. Get it shared. I'd like this conversation to go out further. Thank you very much. Cheers for listening.